welcome back to Flippin' Script Fishing. Now today I want to talk to you about something that has helped me out a lot in the past years. It's probably helped me out more than anything except for time on the water. Now, time on the water is great unless you can't draw from it. Now, this method here helps me to recount trips accurately, to notice patterns, not just patterns from that day, but patterns that happen and work season to season, reservoir to reservoir, regardless of the components that change on a regular basis. It helps me to figure out good starting points, places to begin my search and begin my conquest, to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And that thing is journaling. Journaling is one of the most helpful things that I've done over the years. This is 20 years of journaling that I've done. And I record every significant fish that I catch and where I caught it, what I caught it on, how I caught it, depth, all those things. And from lunar phase to weather conditions to water conditions, all those things to help me figure out what the bass are saying, where they're at, what they're relating to during those specific conditions, that time of year, and those things. Once I've put all that information down on paper, then I can go look at years past and I can figure out what the similarities are. Rather than fishing a particular spot over and over again just because it's been good for me in the past, I can figure out what about that spot made it special, therefore I can repeat that anywhere in the lake, anywhere around the country. Now let me just walk you through a couple things, a handful of things that I've done in my journals that have helped me to organize the information that I'm gathering over the years, that have helped me to put the pieces of the puzzle together and to make bass fishing a little less mysterious and a little bit more predictable, from where to find big fish to where to find concentrations of fish, to recognize patterns that are developing as I'm out on the water from patterns that have developed in the past. So while you don't want to always fish history, history can be a great indicator of future successes and future patterns that will develop. Something I like to do in the beginning of all of my journals is I would start off with all my personal records. Okay, so here I have tournament results, biggest tournament fish, heaviest 5 fish limit, heaviest 3 fish limit, best tournament finish, best divisional finish, best regional finish, best national finish. Okay, so those are my tournament records that, obviously these are personal records, all to be supposed to be broken. And then I have my own personal records. So I have each one of different species of bass. Then I have other species: carp, blue catfish, channel catfish, flathead catfish, etc., 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 etc. Now, this is all starting the year 2020, so it's 2022 now. I've broken some of these records. Other records, have been standing for a long time. Smallmouth bass 2010, striped bass 2005. There's a lot of different fish that the records are still standing strong. So here I have the species, I have the size, the weight according to that equation I use, the date I caught it, and the location I caught it, whether it be Chickamauga, Watts Bar, etc., etc. I also have my top 5 for each species of fish. So I have my top 5 smallmouth, my top 5 largemouth, my top 5 spotted, and then I have also my best 5 fish limits, my personal limits, and I took all these in inches and gave the rough weight that they would have gone. So these are the best 5 fish that I caught in one particular day. 1 24-hour period is usually what I went by. And then I have the overall, the place that I caught them, the location of that place, lunar phase, date, the pattern that they were in, and the lures that caught each one of those fish. So I have all that, all the top 5. So beginning each month, I would have that month, and this would be a summary of the entire month. Just short trips. So these were short trips where I took a time and fished for an hour or two, but it wasn't a full trip. I would always do a review of how many, here I didn't catch any fish over 20 inches this January. So I would also have a review of the lures that were successful, the average that I had for those lures, so I could tell on average which lure caught the bigger fish. So here, a crawfish imitation caught the biggest fish on average. So that would be a monthly review. I would always have a monthly lure that performed, and following that month I would have my specific trips. Okay, all right, so here's March 2020. This is the March overview. Here's the all the fish that I caught over 20 inches that March and what I caught them on. Here's the symbol, the rigs and retrieves and all that good stuff. Here's all the averages for that month, and then I would have my specific trips and what lure. That was the lure, LOD's lure of the day. That was a spinner bait, and I would go from there and have my best 5 fish. And sometimes I would put more than 5 just if I had a notable fish that was a good fish. And here was obviously a good day of fishing. I had a lot of notable fish that would likely make one of my charts. So I wanted to make sure I got all the information on that. As you can see, to make it shorthand, I would use, if I use the same rigs and retrieves, same equipment, then I would just put same as that date. So I knew I could refer back to that date and find out anything I needed to know about the specifics. Here is January 11th, 2020. So I would just come back here, January 11th, 2020, and then I can see all the different shorthand symbols and everything in case I didn't remember what something meant. Okay, here's also the equipment used, and I use Roman numerals for those, so I could say if I used rod number 4, it's a 7-foot medium heavy Shakespeare excursion Fluger Tryon spinning gear with 20-pound braided line on it. Okay. At the end of every trip, I would always put conclusion on what I thought, what happened, why I caught the fish I caught, anything in particular that I thought was significant about that day that might help me out in the future. And of course, the sketch of the lure of the day, this here is actually a guy I had met up there. His name's Nick Harvey. Great guy, helped me out a lot, and turned me on to a little pattern that was really interesting and worked pretty well that day. To start every year, usually until something significant changed, I would start and record everything this way, and then I could refer back to this later on. So to start off every trip, I have the date, I have the time of the trip. This was from 7:30 a.m. to 5:45 p.m. And you'll notice up here at the top, this is the lunar phase. So it was a new moon, designated by obviously the colored in circle. It was certainly a new moon, and this is the percent that it was. So this was a complete new moon. So a couple days later, or here, for instance, this is in February. It was also a new moon, but it was a half moon headed into a new moon, and it was 4.6% full. Okay, so I had that at the top of every one of them. Then I have my location. Here was Lower Chickamauga Lake. Then you have shorthand, so this is actually Booker T. Washington and below. So I stayed below Booker T. Washington on Chickamauga Lake, and that's where all this information is coming from. Here I'd have my weather conditions. So I would usually put exactly what it was. Here it was cloudy and a light rain. Here is the temperature of the day, and usually it's a range, 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Here I have the wind. It was light and moderate breezes, southeast to southwest. So as the day moved on, it went from southeast and changed to southwest. Now you can also put, I have light to moderate, so it was obviously light, but you can put the mileage per hour. Here I have any significant fronts that moved through recently. So a large cold front was approaching. So at the time, obviously that's pretty warm for January. So cold front was approaching. Here I also have the water conditions, and this is what the water conditions were at that time. So it was roughly low 50s, so pretty warm for that time of year. Here's the clarity of the area, the water clarity, 3 to 4 feet. Current, slow to moderate on the main lake. So there's a slow current on the main lake. Color of the water was brown, and the level was winter pool. Okay. Now, so I have all that general information that I can translate back onto any charts. I can try to see any patterns. It also translates for when I'm doing my charts. Here you have January, so I have my lunar phase, and then I have my weather conditions, and then I would also put any other information that I thought was significant, and I would translate that onto my chart. Then I'll go into lures. Okay, these are all the lures that I used. Okay, now early on I would write down every single lure that I used. After a while, I started just putting down the lures that were successful. After all, those are the ones that you want to take note of, and those are the ones that you want to try out again later. So you'll see what I would do is I have symbols that would represent a certain type of lure. Here is a square, and it represents a worm imitation. Okay, and then I would put down the number and each type of worm. So this was a Z-Man trick worm, and here's the color. Here number 2 was a Robo Worm Fat Finesse 4-inch worm, and the color was Aaron's Magic. Third was a Robo Worm Finesse 4-inch Morning Dawn. And then 4 Strike King 3X trick worm, etc., etc. Okay, and that's the specifics about that lure. I would come up with a symbol for each type of lure. So I have a square representing a worm, a triangle representing a crawfish or a lizard imitation, a star that would represent crankbaits, and of course then I have each type of crankbait that I use and the color and that kind of thing. I use 5 different crankbaits that day. So you come up with a classification. You have a symbol that a large group of lures fit under. Obviously this crawfish imitation, you have jigs, tubes, different crawl imitations, creature baits, those types of things. They would all fit under crawl imitations because they all pretty much are imitating a crawfish or something like that. All your worms, you might have ribbon tail worms, straight tail worms, trick worms, lots of different types of worms, but they're all worm imitations. So you get the symbol to represent the type of lure. Then you come down here to your rigs and retrieves. Now this developed over the years, and as I developed, as new rigs come out, techniques come out, then you start a new another symbol for that. And I used uppercase letters to designate those. So A is a Texas rig, B designated bottom bouncing, and obviously that's more of a retrieve, and this is more of a rigging option. Okay, C was a Carolina rig, D drop shot, and so on and so forth. So I would put a type of rig, which might be a drop shot or a Texas rig or a punching rig or those types of things. And then I would also have in here retrieves. So for instance, E is erratic, K represented a fast retrieve, L represented a slow retrieve, M a medium, so on and so forth. That way I could have shorthand for all that stuff. Okay, next thing I would do is I put down all my equipment used. So I'd have Roman numerals that designated the rod and the reel and the line that I used. So here I would start with the length of my rod, the power of my rod, the maker, the brand, and then I would go, and that was all my rod information, and then I would go into the reel information. This was a Pfluger Tryon spinning gear, okay, with 10-pound vicious fluorocarbon, okay. So you go down through here, and then so for instance, this is that rod and reel that I lost a couple years ago, or last year, Roman numeral 8, 7-foot extra heavy carrot stick. It had a Pfluger Tryon casting gear with 20-pound P-line smoke copolymer. So I have all that information here, and then I can refer back to the line, the rod and reel that I used, and what if I was successful or not successful with it, so that I could refer back to what helped me land fish and what did not. Okay, so here are my 5 biggest fish. Now you can do your 5 biggest or all your fish caught or whatever, but I usually would do fish caught. Roughly, I caught 10 fish that day, or yeah, from what I can remember, I caught about 10 fish. My best 5 fish went 77.5 inches. Okay, and here's where all the information is. Okay, so obviously here I did shorthand, and here's where you see that shorthand. So here I used my 7th rod, and that was a 7-foot medium heavy Shimano with Shakespeare casting gear with 50-pound Pro-Line braid, or Power Pro braid. So that was my first fish I caught. It was caught on an Alabama rig, okay, and you'll see 1M. So it was over here. You have it was a Strike King titanium umbrella rig with 4 willow blades, okay, and you can see here I used that with 2, so it was the Strike King perfect swim baits, Tennessee shad, okay. Then I had M, which meant that was a medium. You'll recall back to here, it's a medium retrieve. So I was using that umbrella rig at a medium retrieve. It's a 7.5 inch, approximately 2.5 pound smallmouth bass that I caught on that. Here's the time that I caught it. Here's the depth that I caught it, off riprap near the swimming area at the dam. So this is exactly where I caught it, and that way I can in later dates I can check that area and so on and so forth. Here I have all my conclusion, and I talk about anything that I thought was something I did right, something I did wrong, what I would do in hindsight if I had to do over again. Here was the lure of the day that I used, which was a shaky head 4H. So it was a worm, number 4, Strike King 3X trick worm on green pumpkin red, and it was H, which you would see here is a shaky head. Okay, so I have all the information I need here. Here's May of 2016. You can see here I can cut down on the amount of stuff I'm writing. Okay, so once or twice I can write down once or twice I write down all the specifics. I take the time to do that, and then later on I can use all shorthand. So I have same as, this is when the information changed, whether it was most likely it was my equipment. I probably put new line on, that kind of thing, but you can see how much shorter it is. It's all that same information in a shorter period of space. And then I still have all of what was successful, and I can write down the lures. There's a worm, there's number 3, of course that's going to change each trip. So it's a Z-Man trick worm on a shaky head, bottom bouncing, slow, 15-inch fish, roughly 2 pounds, largemouth bass. The time I caught it, the depth I caught it, on a secondary point on the opposite side at Alice Bay. Okay, so these are all specific things. That day, Carolina rig was most successful for me, and etc. etc. Okay,
So you can see how, one page I can get all the information I need. Here's the next day of information that I had, and I can adjust accordingly, and I can improve. And here's, it went from Carolina rig being successful, and literally 4 days later my jig was more successful. So as you have more and more data, then you can start to make your charts, and you can organize that data in different ways in order to see patterns. And this is cross-referencing lunar phase. So we have new moon, half moon, full moon, and then cross-referencing that with weather conditions. So you have clear, partly cloudy, and rainy or overcast conditions. Okay, here's just some summary of each year, the 5 biggest I caught in that particular year. And then I would break each month down, and I would have each month with the lunar phase and the weather conditions cross-referenced, and I'd have the 5 biggest under each of those conditions. So when you cross-reference those 3 lunar phases and then 3 weather conditions, you'll get 9 different conditions. And then you would have the 5 biggest under each one of those conditions. So you'd have 45 bass per month, and you'd start to see those patterns develop. This is March, under half moon, clear conditions, my 5 biggest fish that I caught. Okay, so I have the length, size, the lure, type of lure, symbol, the depth, 5 feet, 6 feet, 2 feet, 25 feet, 4 feet. Okay, then I do my average on what caught most. Obviously 4 of the 5 are caught on crankbaits. So in March, a crankbait, in particular a rattle trap or a lipless crankbait, is the best lure to use to catch bigger fish. The spring crawl on shallow flats, or excuse me, here's a color spring crawl is best. Here's my average size of my 5 fish, and here's the average location or structure. So I would want to focus on shallow flats, points in bays, and that's where I would start my search. So upcoming in March, if it's a clear day, half moon condition, this is where I would start, and then I would go from there. Now it may not be what's happening that day, but this is a good place to start. It's a good type of lures to have tied on, and it's a good starting point. Conversely, if I am fishing in, let's see here, September, okay, and it's rainy outside and a full moon, okay, here I can show you, or I can find on the types of places that I would start fishing, and that's my starting point. So I want to be throwing in September. I want to be under those conditions. I want to be throwing either a blade bait or a topwater lure. This gives me my expectations on average. I can expect to catch some reasonable quality 18-inch fish, and here's colors I might want to look at: black and blue or green and brown, and type of structure. Okay, this is focusing on rocks and matted grass. This helps after a while. When you compile data, then you can figure out where you want to start, what you want to do, types of fish that you can expect to catch, the type of stuff you want to throw, and the type of places that you want to target. Now remember, these are all starting points, and they may change. You get out there and things are just very different, and you want to start to put together the pieces of the puzzle as you're out there. This just gives you a good place to start. It's kind of like putting the piece of the puzzle. You put the edge pieces up there first, and then you start from there, and then you figure out the rest of the puzzle. Here's a good one, and you can, if you visit another lake, you can at a certain time of year, you can see what was working that time. Here, for instance, this is Wheeler Lake. I was catching really well on a tube, and in fact I caught this big one on there. went 6.6 pounds, and it was a great fish to have in the tournament. Obviously, I ended up finishing 11th in that tournament. It was actually the Ray Scott Championship, and but this is a great way to recall information from the past accurately. Here I also like to do little sketches, and I would try and write where each fish came from. Like, here's the first, third, fourth, and fifth fish all came off of these rocks. So you can really see patterns develop when you recount this type of information. Here's another place. This was on Nickajack, places where this is the water current and the way it was flowing, and how I caught them and where I caught the fish. Now this is an incredible day. Caught 30 plus fish. This was a regional on Lake Norman. I have a lot of information there, even a little bit of scrapbooking stuff, some newspaper clippings, that kind of thing. Day 1, day 2, all on Norman. And of course I recounted everything, all the rigs and all the equipment I used, the lures I used, all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it's just good to go look back and recount some of the tournaments that you were in and how you did. Here's a Watts Bar tournament, how I done the Watts Bar, Nickajack, Chickamauga. So, all great information.
Guys, I can't tell you how much this information has helped me over the years. Now, obviously, I started, this was back in 2002. I started very simple stuff, and over the years, I have refined it and made it into a lot more detailed information where I can look back, I can recount things accurately. That's the important things. Oftentimes, we don't recount things. We'll be like, I think 5 years ago I did this or that, and it's not accurate. It's there's something off, and that could be the key on why you can't reproduce it and why you can't put the pieces of the puzzle together today, because you're recounting information wrong from yesterday or 5 years ago. This is a way to get that information down and organize it, and make charts and see patterns develop that you wouldn't otherwise see or notice. Based on what you actually catch, those patterns start to develop, and you'll start to see those start to come out in your own reservoir or your own lake, and that will give you a leg up and help you not waste time and put the pieces of the puzzle together faster, more accurately, and ultimately help you catch more and bigger fish on a regular basis. I would definitely encourage anybody who's serious about bass fishing, who really wants to improve, really wants to enjoys setting their own personal records and breaking them, and then being able to recall them accurately. I would certainly recommend doing your own journals, and it's been a big help to my fishing. I hope this information has been helpful to you guys. If it has, please give me a thumbs up, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I can hopefully put out more of this type of information, and we can all help each other to grow, guys. So I hope this helps, and until next time, tight line.